Hi everyone. I'm gonna do a video, like a introduction of myself video, or getting to know me video, because someone asked me to. Thank you for asking. Yeah, so let's get got started. I'm a middle-aged Chinese American. I was born and raised in America, and I live in San Francisco, California. I was born and raised in San Francisco by migrant parents, from China, and, so I consider myself American, and that Americanness is, like, basically almost in every part of I was basically raised in America, so I almost never really spoke much Chinese. Our family speaks, like, it's not even the official Mandarin Chinese. Our family comes from this area in, called Toisan, and this is an area where the people that built the, first Chinatowns and built the railroads came from. It's in, the area of the mainland directly next to Hong Kong, which is an island, and we're Cantonese people. So Cantonese people are quite unlike genetically and are quite unlike Northern Chinese. So China isn't really like homogeneous. It's a bunch of people that came from different genetic backgrounds and different tribes that had different customs that for some reason or other decided to join together as Han Chinese, but technically we all speak our own most of us speak our own dialects. This is from the regions that we're from, and the regions have different customs, different foods, different other stuff. But the one thing that connects us is the written language, because the language is not uh, phonetic like an alphabet. It's by meaning. So you see it and you know what that character means. So it's very different. But I didn't know it. I don't know hardly any of that. In fact, I mean, in order to be literate, you have to know like at least 3,000 words. At this time, I probably know less than 50. I mean, not words, characters. I know less than 50. So I am probably worse than the a kindergartner, Chinese kindergartner in that language. Well, I mean, and everything I do is mostly in the English language. So anyways, and they also say that if you dream in a language, that's your language, main language. So I dream in English. So I consider myself like basically American. Of course, the Chinese part has influenced my life in certain ways, but I would say like mostly in the food and dealing with my family type of way. And also other ways too, of course, naturally. So I'm middle-aged, and that's really important, actually. And I suddenly joined YouTube, a few years ago. I was always an avid YouTube, watcher, but I was just a participant. And, my job is a paper pusher office worker. So I wouldn't say it's boring. It's actually not boring. I find it, like, quite challenging sometimes. It involves, like, fund management, but not personal finances. I work for a university, so yes. So basically, it's difficult in certain ways that, yeah, let's just put it at that. But I'm also grateful because it has an okay salary, and also health benefits naturally, and also, which enables me to carry out hobbies and, have some discretionary funding to spend. Uh, yeah, but during the stressful times, sometimes I feel like, just wanna throw it over and quit. It can get that stressful. A lot of times it invades my actual life, but that's probably because maybe I can work on my time management better. But who can't really, right? So let me just say that, yeah, I started this channel because I felt like my job doesn't really allow me to express myself. Uh, I, you know, I want to get my thoughts out into the public. I don't have children, so uh, uh, that's by choice. And the reason my feeling behind it is this. So, I actually feel like I might have autistic genes, or I'm on the autistic spectrum, and like the genetics might run in my family. And I my cousin was married to I mean, is married, and she has a child who is autistic. And I have been to their house several times, and I think maybe the child, who is very sweet and loving, but it's a difficult thing. So I felt like I couldn't. I was afraid. You know what I mean? I was afraid because some of the symptoms, and I went and researched autism when I went home. I find I have it myself. But of course to a lesser degree, and naturally, like, socially, I'm a little bit awkward. And when I was young, I had hand flapping, you know, thing, and also repetitive, like, motions, and, like, spinning. Like, he likes to spin coins. I was obsessively spinning coins when I was younger. And I think, like, a lot of I was also didn't understand certain social cues. So that made my life when I was, like, younger a bit of a little hellish. The weird thing was when I was absolutely, like, oblivious to it, I was actually I was not embarrassed because I was so oblivious to it when I was really young. But when you reach middle school, I mean, actually, it started in like 5th grade, 5th to 6th grade. I started having an awareness about how other people reacted to me. Before that, I was like absolutely oblivious. I was in my own little world. And I think like that's kind of like what autism one of the things of autism is the autistic person is actually they're in their own little world, basically. They're obsessively in their own little world. And somehow I was able to like start gaining self-awareness and awareness of how like others saw me. And I was able to kind of break out of that like bubble, thankfully, because if I hadn't had been able to achieve that, I can't even imagine how difficult my life would be nowadays. I would definitely not have gotten this job. I would not have been able to interact like well with people. People might have a very bad opinion of me and think I'm a bad person or not someone that they want to associate with because of my behaviors. Like I used to, when I was young, I used to shout, you know what I mean? Because I was so excited and so enthused about stuff. And that's a good thing about autism is like you feel things so intensely. I mean, it's good and bad, but I feel like if you're a connoisseur or you're a critic, you can basically like describe things in excruciating detail. You notice things in excruciating detail, and like the slightest nuance, you're like sensitive to it. And I would used to, you know, shout out like my observations. Like I was young enough to think that everybody would appreciate it, and naturally, most people don't. And the way I carried myself was, unappealing. It was kind of like I pushed myself onto other people, and I didn't let them react to me. And the weirdest thing was I kind of like projected my own feelings on other people, and I thought that maybe it would surprise me that they didn't feel the same. Like, yeah, it's kind of like mortifying to even talk about, but you know, if we're just being honest, why not? Right? I mean, So that was the childhood that I came up with. I was constantly being like confused. And then later on, when I looked back on my behavior, like kind of mortified, you know what I mean? So it was like it was a large, uh, it was like a large learning curve. And as I was younger, I was always like on the disorganized, procrastinating, and side. You know what I mean? It always um, not shocked me, but it was always a case of wonderment. It's a sense of wonderment. Um, I would see all the other little girls, and they would always be neatly dressed, like neat, and I would be the one with that like had like frayed shoelaces and like stains on my clothes from like being sloppy when I was eating, or like unconsciously dropping ink on my like sweaters and stuff like that. And it never used to bother me because to me, I thought it was just trivial, you know what I mean? It never I was, like, thinking, like, it doesn't really hurt anyone, so what difference does it make? But to me, when I look at those girls, when I was aware of it, and I saw how neatly dressed they were in their little, like, lacy blouses and skirts, and, they had their neat little bookcases with their pencil boxes, and, they were wealthier than my family, so I was always jealous and envious because they had, like, Hello Kitty pencil cases, and some of these cases were, like, like, really, like, engineering feats. Like, if you pressed a button, the eraser part would flick out like a switchblade on the side, and you can put your eraser back in, and you can click it back in. I mean, it's like, wow, and then if you pressed a button, the they would be double-sided cases, heavily decorated in this Sanrio stuff. I mean, Sanrio is from Japan, so they had, like, some really neat, like, things, like, back in the '80s. You pressed a thing and the whole case, the flap would flap open, and then inside there would be, like, these little loops where you put your pens and, pencils, and they even had, like, mechanical pencils and mechanical, like, lead and stuff like that, and I just found it a marvel, and my family can't afford that, so, you know, from a young age, I was always, like, kind of conscious of that, and I always was kind of, like, envious, and I always made a promise to myself that if I could afford it, I would go and, like, buy these for myself, so at a young age, I already started, like, noticing the finer things in life. It didn't help that, I was bullied because of my maybe autism, and I was a very timid child, that didn't assert myself. I didn't understand what that meant, actually, so I was always, in my early, kindergarten and 1st grade, I was in this, public school in San Francisco, and my mom had already made steps to try to get me into the better neighborhood public schools because we lived in a ghetto, basically, one of the worst neighborhoods in San Francisco, and she actually, like, was able to get me into another, richer neighborhoods, like, schools because so I can, have a I can get better resources as for education, but she, um there was one boy who I don't know, I felt kinda sorry for him, actually, but he was really, like, mean. He was probably acting out, like, aggression that was actually shown to him by his own parents or his, like, authority figures, and he basically, like, out of nowhere, with no provocation from me or nothing, he would just out of nowhere, like, punch me or stomp on me or push me or do mean things to me. And I would come home crying all day. So my mom actually was forced to send me to a private Chinese school, the cheapest one that she could find in Chinatown. And then I was like kind of insulated in this like environment. So this private Chinese school um, allowed me to grow up. I mean, to spend third, fourth, and fifth and sixth grade with a limited bunch of people that were mostly Chinese, and I would say that this was one of the best times of my life. Um, but, uh, yeah, so that's I would say, like, yeah, I'll go into some other day. It's a cool story actually, but yeah, so I grew up like that. Then after 6th grade, I was forced to go into, like, an inner city middle school, and that was not great, but I got through it. And then after that, yeah, I I just liked learning for learning because I was like a nerd and I loved the library. I like practically lived there. And basically, I got through high school and I was exposed to like higher performing academics, and what do we call advanced placement classes and stuff. So there was like an intensive learning experience that burned me out. I developed bad habits when I was in school, and this started in the private school, actually. I was never really that disciplined to begin with. I don't know if I had ADHD or something like that, but I had a hard time focusing in class, and if it did not interest me, I could not focus, and that's the problem. And I was one of those, feather-brained people that I would try to figure out ways around it. So basically, when I found out that we didn't have to turn in the full homework assignment, the teacher would just um, put all the students in a ring, in a circle, and he would ask each person to just shout out the answer to one of the questions. If that was the case, then basically, like, if I sat in the middle of the circle, I would only have to do that one. I would have to do the one in the middle. So I would just do the problem for that. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't have to answer 20 questions. I would just answer one because that was the format. And he never collected them because he didn't think it was necessary. You know what I mean? So I figured out early in life how to cut corners, and I thought I was being clever. It was probably just the worst thing that could happen to me. And the worst thing was that year, I was awarded the best student in class, and my report card had all A's except for handwriting or something like that. Penmanship, I got like a B plus or A minus or something. And I got the best like student in class. And the weirdest thing was I was gobsmacked because I felt like such the biggest fraud. And another thing is I felt so guilty because there was this one girl named Sandy, and she was always getting the best grades and everything, and she was second to me, and I felt so bad because, like, that whole year, I really spent no effort, hardly any effort on anything, and I just skated by, and I was having a great time, you know what I mean? We did projects like sew pillows and stuff like that. All these cool projects I really liked, but I was never really you know what I mean? I felt like such a fraud. So, but after that, I realized like, hey, is this the way to do it? You just skate by in life by just doing the minimum effort. And if you do it correctly, nobody would know. You know what I mean? And then it would seem like you did everything you needed to. And that was like one of the worst habits that I developed when I was still like in 4th grade. So yeah, that habit kind of like came with me through high school. And yeah, so I basically loved the studying. I loved reading the books in school, but I did not like doing the homework. I didn't mind doing the tests because actually I knew the answers, but I just didn't want to do the homework. To me, homework was just like copying word by word from the book, you know what I mean? So what was the point of that, right? It was just like a waste of time to me because I already knew the answers. So in high school, I barely got past uh I got like C's in one class, math, I got F's, yeah, and D's. So what I used to do in math class was when they started talking, I would put like earphones in my ears, and I would put the Walkman. Back then it was like Sony Walkman, or I had an Iowa Walkman. I would put the I would have long hair and it would cover my ears, so I would feed feed the wires under into my ears and cover it with my hair. And the wires, I would have the thing in my coat pocket and in an inner pocket of my coat, and I would zip it up so they can't see anything, and there would be no wires facing the teacher because they were coming outside, you know, underneath, like around my neck, and they would loop over and fit in my ears. And then whenever there was a test, I would just pass the paper behind me. So at some point, I kind of like quit, you know what I mean? I was burned out in school, in high school, as long as that. And so basically, yeah, that was like a whole fiasco. And everyone was really surprised that I wasn't going straight to university. And not living up to my potential was something that was associated with me at that age. And every time people say to me, "But you're so smart," when they talk about the grades and everything like that, I don't know what to say, you know what I mean? I think at that time I started getting depressed because to me, growing up was just like a grind. I already knew it at that age. Like, I did not feel excited in a way to have to go out and make a living. You know what I mean? Because there was a lot of things that I did not like to do. Um, I only wanted to read and appreciate things. So the reality of that like made me depressed. Also, nobody realized, including myself, that I might have like you know, ADHD and maybe probably autism, and I couldn't concentrate. So my mom, if an Asian person, a Chinese person in that era, I don't know if they still do it anymore, but back then, if you brought failing grades to your parents, they will beat you with a stick, and that's what happened to me. My mom beat my, I think, was it the right calf? No, the right thigh. So I'm like a well muscled person, thickly muscled, especially my thighs because I did a lot of walking. She beat me with, um, what do you call it? Those like bamboo dusters where it's like full of feathers on top. It's like a duster, you know, where you dust stuff with it. And then the handle is like bamboo, which is like a really hard wood and quite thin. So she hit me with that um, as a way of venting and to punish me for my. She wanted me to react. You know what I mean? And all I kept remembering was not reacting and then not crying. The weirdest thing. I kind of knew I had that coming because So she hit me so hard and so long. And the weirdest thing was I kept thinking in my head, like, wow, I wonder how long she's gonna she would be able to do this for. And then at some point she just kind of gave up. And then I walked from my home to the library, which was just like 10 minutes walk down the hill. And as I was walking, I felt the blood vessels, all the blood that had fallen out of the vessels, they're like sloshing around in the upper part of the top part of my thigh. And it was just like a weird sensation. It felt like it was like waterlogged or something. It didn't even really hurt that bad. It just kind of stung. And when I went home that day and I took off my pants, the it the thigh was swollen, like the bruise was like a massive bruise, like maybe almost like 8 to 9 inches long and kind of like oval. It like covered almost my entire thigh, the top part of my thigh. And it was like 2 or 3 inches above the rest of my skin. It had bruised that much and it was full of liquid. And that bruise, like, I mean, the swelling went down, but the color from the bruise, like the broken, like blood vessel look, the bruise itself stayed for like a couple of years. And I remember like a few years later, I was dressing and my mom had, come into the room because it was a small house and, and basically there's no privacy in Chinese household. Nope. And basically she saw my thigh, the bruise on my thigh, which I had thought had, it was like barely, it's a faint image of itself. And she was like, "Where'd you get that bruise?" Like, I can tell she was like scared. You know what I mean? She was like getting traumatized. But for some reason, I didn't let her have it. If I wanted to, I could have made her feel guilty. So I said, "Oh, I just bumped into a coffee table." And she goes, "Oh, yeah, uh, don't be so clumsy." But I can tell she kind of knew that that was her doing. So anyway, my mom just kind of lost her mind. Another thing about my childhood is my mom. My mom is a was a very driven and ambitious woman. She is kind of like the adventurous and daring one in her family, and she was the one that kind of like got us. Mm, she was the one that kind of tries to push us to do well in life because my dad is okay. She married my dad. It was an arranged marriage between these two families in China. So my dad um, came from a household. My dad is not the most intelligent guy. He's a nice guy, but he's not the most intelligent guy. Let's just put it that. And he was raised in a single mom family with a domineering woman. We call her the dragon lady, or Turkey. That was the kids, her grandkids, like a name for her is Turkey because she's kind of aggressive. And she was yeah, she was very aggressive and pushy and strong-willed. So this woman, and she was also like a neat freak and control freak. So my mom is like me, a slob, and she is intelligent. She gets things done, but she's also like a control freak and sloppy, and she also has hoarding tendencies. So my mom was forced to marry, not forced to marry, they didn't know any better. She married a guy that was totally unsuitable for her in terms of intelligence, ambition, and just personality. He was the nicest guy. Like my dad would be the last person to cheat on you. He's like honest to a fault. But that's probably because he's not that intelligent, but he's a very kind and loving person. It's just that, you can't really get into a debate with him. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like when he says stuff, everybody just smiles and you know what I mean? Like that. So she married him and he and his mom, my grandma, was like the bane of her life. So basically, when you have two strong-willed people, my mom is very strong-willed and my grandma is very strong-willed, and you have one slob, and you have but the slob is really ambitious, and she's got great ideas. She earns money and she wants to educate her children and let them do well in life. And then you have the control dragon lady, control freak, neat freak grandma who's like super conservative, and you're just gonna have clashes. So we had Clash of the Titans in my house. Um, when I was young, these would affect me like immensely. Like they would every once in 6 months, they would get into these terrible fights that would just like last all night, where they would drag up like stuff from like 10, 20 years ago. Well, and back then you did this to me, and then back then you did this to me type of crap. You know what I mean? And I would have to bear them. And then during those nights, I would spend the whole night crying, couldn't go to sleep. You know what I mean? So my mom was married into a family like that. So she got very depressed. And yeah, so she was able to get her own family to come. So she would, in order to, avoid my grandma, she would actually leave the house after work and she would just go to her sister's house. Her sisters and her family lived next door in the next apartment building. And she would go there all night and then she would come back, late at night when we were all asleep. So for several years, I kind of didn't have my own mom. Another thing is, my mom is like a scary mom. You know how some people for an autistic person who doesn't know like social cues or how to act and be and it was very tongue tied and awkward. She was really hard to deal with because she would get like she's very emotional, first of all, and not calm and rational. You know what I mean? I mean, in her expression, she has a fiery temper herself, and you never knew if you were going to say something wrong, and she would just go crazy in terms of like you were be sitting for a 3 hour lecture or something like that. You know what I mean? And she would start crying or something. So a lot of times my childhood was kind of like a minefield. Like, you didn't want to get on this person's bad side because then you would be up for like a scolding and then this other person would go crazy or something like that. So a lot of times it was like a tightrope. You were just navigating, both sides of that. And I used to hate my mom. Um, or I used to dislike her intensely because of these issues, and I did not have any sympathy for her because and I also hated my grandma because of her domineeringness. Because and I liked my dad because my dad was the least complicated and he was the nicest. So I would just hang out with my dad. And yeah, so basically that was my childhood. But I was able to break out of that because I think like when I was in high school, I just stood up for myself. Back then, I didn't know how to stand up for myself. And at some point, something entered into my brain where I told myself, you know what, Tara, if you don't stand up for yourself, you're going to be in this mess always. So at one of these arguments, whereas I used to just suffer in silence, I actually spoke up and I said, you know what? You better stop this. I said to both parents, and I said, I don't care, who you are. You've been arguing for hours and we're trying to sleep. There's other people in this house and in this apartment. How do you think they're going to feel the way you're handling it? You know what I mean? I said, if you can't stand each other, just get a divorce. I sick and tired of the way you're dealing with it. I said, I understand you get frustrated, but if you can't work it out, then just go your own way. You know what I mean? Don't let me suffer along with you. I don't deserve this, right? I have a life myself, and this is your own problem. You're adults. And I said that. I remember saying that. And the weirdest thing was I thought they would then just like pounce on me and start like tearing me apart. But what they did was surprise me. And this is one of the most significant like milestones in my life is I was young and I never wanted to speak up and I was really timid because I was afraid of the consequences. You know what I mean? I was afraid of what happened. But when I stood up for myself as a teenager to my parents, they actually said, "Oh, you're right. That wasn't right." And they modified their behavior. So at that time I learned how to I still hate confrontations. That's something I try to weasel out of, a lot. I try to avoid confrontations at all costs. But if I have to stand my ground, I will. I learned from that one time to express myself well. You know what I mean? So also that has come in handy in terms of like relationships and stuff like that. Um, I'm always in fear of being too emotional when I'm with in relationships. So I try to find partners that I'm afraid of explosive temper, let's just put it that way, from my childhood. I'm afraid of people that express themselves with like actions. And I don't like it when people have it all pent up inside of them and then they can't stand it and then they explode, especially physically. I don't even know how to handle that. With words, I can handle, you know what I mean? Because I am now like an expert at de-escalating and trying to get people to, trying to use humor to diffuse the situation, trying to, calm things down in terms of another thing is trying to have relationships where people compromise in a way that's acceptable for both people. You know what I mean? That you give a little here, you give a little there, and then, we're good. That type of situation. So I'm really good at that, I feel. Another thing is, and this is the bane of my life, is that I've never been able to keep myself disciplined. I think discipline is really hard for me because I'm all over the place. And I've been living my life like here, hither, thither, blown here, blown there, you know what I mean? And I find it hard to concentrate, like I said. And it's kind of a nightmare at my job sometimes when I have that, So when I feel that way, I tend to procrastinate and I let the deadline pressure like push me into working. And when I do apply myself to it, I'm able to do it. You know what I mean? But it's a really hard for me to do that. And I know now that there's like medications, there's, habits, you know what I mean, that you can do, but I'm able to do it mostly in my professional career. But without my job, I don't know how I would be. So yeah, so that's how I am. And if you notice in my channel, I don't tend to stick to one thing. I like this, I like that, and I'm just going to let it show because it's my channel. So why not? Um, it's not for, I love you guys. Thanks for supporting me and everything. And I hope you get something out of this, if just for amusement or just like, maybe you find some insight into how I am. And then, so anyways, that's how I am. Yeah. So I feel like, I used to, as far as luxury stuff goes, I was always aware of the finer things in life. Any teenagers who read Vogue will know like there's another side of the story and they'll lust after like luxuries and stuff like that. Um, now that I'm older and I've attained some of these so-called luxuries, I can just take it or give it. It's not absolutely essential in life. In fact, some of these things are actually quite stupid and they don't really they don't make my life better. So I just avoid it. You know what I mean? I try to only pursue the stuff that tries to make my life a little bit better. In terms of like pleasure or something like that. I I have to stop myself from being a pure hedonist because if I don't, I'll be broke and you know what I mean? And another thing is the reason why I have to discipline myself right now is when I go into something, I tend to go really deep. The problem is some of these things might just be fleeting. So if I don't try to slow myself down, I will really regret it. Excuse me, regret it. And yeah, the only things that have stuck with me are perfume, food, naturally, because I can't avoid food. But I don't eat like richly all the time. I don't eat like super rich foods all the time. I mean, I try to think of it as a treat. So for me, I feel that, you know, I know psychologically that if you take things for granted, meaning that you have too much of one thing, you will not appreciate it. Too much of one thing is not a luxury anymore. It's just like regular. That's just like your baseline. So I can't really, people have to fool themselves. And this is the wisest way to go is by saying that these are treats. And treats should be only occasional. Just like I bought all that chocolate, right? Am I going to just wolf it down? No, because if I did, I would not have the same appreciation for it. You know what I mean? I might be tempted to, but I can't. If I dole it out to myself occasionally, then that's a treat. I might give some of these to coworkers or something. Then to them, it's a treat. So that's my current and my thought as to luxury. Actually, I never really cared for bags that much. I think there was a time in my life where when I first started working, coming from that poor background, I was actually a saver. And basically, for my first or 2, 3 years working at like a retail store, even though I had access to money, what I did first was I saved a whole bunch in in the bank, what I could. It was like a part-time job. So I lived with my parents, so it was not difficult. And basically, what I did with it was I would just buy sandwiches and like snacks and stuff like that, which was already a good thing for me because being poor and never having really an allowance, I never really ate out at restaurants or anything. So it was a treat for me to go out and, have my first credit card, have cash, go out and eat occasionally at a restaurant. And they weren't expensive restaurants. They were like TGI Fridays or something like that. And that was like, I was so proud when I was like paying the bill with my credit card at my first time at TGI Fridays, and I treated my cousin who introduced me to that retail job. That was like a really proud day of my life. And then after that, like a year or so of having constant money, I started upgrading my wardrobe. And at that time I was like thin, and I mean, to me, I felt pretty. So thin and pretty, I bought some wardrobe stuff. Naturally, it wasn't racy stuff because I've never been the type that really liked like low cut skirts, low cut necklines or skirts or jewelry or anything like that. And so I would just get some nicer made clothes, not too extravagant. I would mostly just get them on sale. I had a problem with clothes where I would go to like Banana Republic or Gap or one of these places, and I would not buy things on full price. That suited me. So here's the thing: I would try to see if I can get it on sale, and I would just go straight to the sales rack because I was programmed to get a bargain. And I would just buy stuff that probably didn't even suit me, but I liked something about it. Like I liked the fabric, I liked the pattern, I liked something, and wouldn't even bother to try it on. I would just buy it because it was on sale. And a lot of these things, when I came home with it, it didn't suit me whatsoever. I'm short and stocky. Um, I have a really long torso, and short legs. So a lot of these things look like crap on me, especially the sales stuff. I should have, instead of buying all the sales stuff, and I didn't even wear it, it still had tags on it, you know what I mean? And I was so upset with myself. But I noticed it's like a pattern. Um, but it used to be that I couldn't focus on what I really wanted and needed. And I would go out and buy things of lesser items that I didn't really need, but they were on sale. You know what I mean? And they were kind of like frivolous. So I would frit away my uh, discretionary allocation on these things and buy unsuitable stuff, instead of getting the stuff that really suited me and just getting less because they were more expensive. And I still, to this day, have a slight problem with this. Um, like recently, I had been wanting some nicer things, but because they were like a larger bill, I immediately didn't like look towards it. To me, and I just put it on the back burner. And then came some trinkets and things that were less money. And then I bought those things. But when you added up all the little things that I bought that weren't that important, I still enjoyed it, but I would have enjoyed that one more expensive object much, much more. Um, I could have bought it. That's the problem is I have to not spend it, fritter away my stuff on little things and focus on the larger things. And thank God I was able to, in my work, we have set up like, 401ks and stuff like that. I have an automated savings that saves like automatically takes it from my paycheck. So I don't even have access to it and puts it away in an account as savings. And the good thing is that because it's 401k, it's not taxed at the moment. So it's, slowly growing in that savings. Otherwise, I don't even want to know like what my savings would be. Because at one point, and this point was steadily growing. So it used to be that when I first started spending money, I upgraded my wardrobe, and then I stopped getting that interested in clothes. You know what I mean? Because once you have enough clothes, you're just like, eh. And I found out I started getting wise about the clothes. Nowadays, there's no clothes that I buy that needs to be returned. Everything I buy, I can immediately wear and it suits me and it's perfect. So I've gotten so wise with the clothes now. And I have been wearing stuff that suits me and it's comfortable and my lifestyle and everything like that. No problem. And they're not expensive. I like to think that I know what suits me with clothes. But other stuff, I used to buy tons of books, like a shit ton of books. I have like 5 or 6 like bookcases. I actually worked at one time for a famous San Franciscan antiquarian bookstore called Acorn, and we would get like books for cheap, and also like lots of people would bring in books for sale. A lot of those books didn't have good resale value because they would be like pulp books from the 70s or something like that. No one's buying that, and they're not in great condition. So I would some of the when we told these people that we couldn't buy it, you know what I mean? Then they would say, "Well, I was going to get rid of it anyway." So then they're like, "Can you get rid of it for me?" And we'll be like, "Okay, sure." So we would take it in and we would put it in the back. And then sometimes when I was taking lunch in the back room, I would leaf through it and there would be some interesting topics, right? So the bookstore owner would say, you know what? Just take some of those home if you want them because no one wants them, right? So we would take some of these books home, and a lot of my shelves are full of that, you know what I mean? And I found some really interesting things like, there was this book called The Never Ending Night or something like that. And it was like a book written about the brothels of Yoshiwara, Japan, in the 1800s or something like that. Like, yeah, that stuff was really fascinating to me. And there would be like politically incorrect books where this guy wrote about the variety of Asian women and his judgments, his critiques of them, and everything like that. So, yeah, I have a lot of these really interesting books at my house, and there was also one giant book from the 1800s that talked about. It was like a gathering of articles and stories and whatnot about the Chinese people in America back in the day, and boy, it was very interesting reading. So I bought that. Um, yeah, so that's of probably historical like significance or something, or I just like it. So yeah, so I have tons of books. Right now, my apartment is so full of stuff that I don't buy much physical books anymore unless they have like absolutely stunning pictures, like picture books and stuff like that. That can't be really replicated on a Kindle or something like that. But I buy things like on Kindle now, and also read like tons of magazines and articles and stuff. So I buy a lot of magazines for pleasure. Once or twice a year, I will go into like a magazine stand that has like a lot of magazines and buy like tons of magazines to read. For fun and for pleasure. And then after I'm done with them, I'll keep them for a couple of years. And then after that, I just bring the magazines to my laundry place and just throw it in the magazine baskets. So I know one guy, he always waits for me to do that. And then as soon as I drop them in, um, I see him taking them all out and taking to it to his house. So hopefully he's not in a hoarding situation. But anyways, yeah, so that's kind of like my life. Just like 7 years ago, I had to deal with my grandma who was passing away due to dementia, and it was like a really arduous and terrible process. And I felt like I was trapped in the house with her, and I started looking at Louis Vuitton, and that's when my love affair, short, it's a lifelong affair, but especially with high luxury bags started, and I started ordering like Louis Vuitton and stuff like that. Although I didn't go too crazy because it was very expensive. I like to say that my perfume hobby, um, whilst it's more troublesome in terms of storage, is less expensive overall than if I had like a handbag addiction, which I did at some point. But, one handbag is like, I don't know, maybe 100. No, is it 100? At least like 50, like 50 or so like bottles of perfume or something like that. So it's not even comparable at this point. But anyways, I'm just like mumbling. So yeah, that's like my history in a shell. And yeah, what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to record myself. Like after my grandma's like dementia thing, then I was thinking, you know what? I might have to mention my family. And I'm like in my late 40s and now I'm like freaking forgetting stuff. And I was like, oh crap. You know, I used to, when I was young and I was naive, I used to disdain taking photos of oneself. You know what I mean? I used to think it was cheesy and stupid to take pictures of yourself posing with, like, you know, oh, here I am next to the statue of so and so, you know what I mean? Or at events and stuff like that, or posing with your family. Because I was thinking, like, wait a minute, that's your family. You see them every day. What's the big deal? No, it turns out that these pictures and all these things are actually very precious. And I didn't realize it till I went to several funerals and I saw the pictures of the people. And I thought, oh my God, you know, it's important to have these pictures on the walls. I mean, have these pictures available. Um, the shallow side is that you don't want, when you die, you don't want people to think you live like a pitiable and miserable life, you know, devoid of fun and events and stuff. I mean, of course I mean, it's quite shallow, you know, and egotistical to think that way, but that was kind of like one of my thoughts, you know what I mean? I don't want people to think I lived a terrible freaking life because I didn't have any pictures. Yeah, it's so stupid. But another thing is I'm actually enjoying the pictures that I've taken now. I find it very pleasurable to look at. So I'm like, changed my mind on that. You know what I mean? I used to be very judgmental and naive when I was young. And I would never do that, you know. And then now I'm doing all the stuff that I said I wasn't going to do because I was young. You know, young people can be very judgmental. And yeah, so I just do whatever makes me happy at this moment. And I'm glad that at this moment, oh, another thing is like I said, I started getting depressed when I was a kid. So, trying to stay even keeled and on task is actually one of my strongest challenges. Yeah, but I mean, I'm doing it somewhat okay. So what gives is I'm actually like a very low energy person, and that might have to do with like whole bunch of things, but I have to realize part of growing mature is that you have to realize that you have to let go of certain things. When I was young, it was be very easy to say, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, I'm going to be like this, I'm going to be like that. Well, then reality hits you, like I keep saying, and you can't do, even if you have the talent, which I freaking don't, you know what I mean? I don't have that. I'm not multi-talented like I was delusional enough to think, you know, and a lot of things you have to have the talent to reach, you know, a certain thing. You can't you can't just absorb stuff and be good at things or even enjoy all the things that you thought you would enjoy. So, and knowing that your life is finite, um, and your time is finite, it really helps you concentrate on the things that you actually like. So I like to think that I'm doing that right now, plus or minus certain things. Like I hate housework and I'm it's probably shameful to admit, but actually I'm not that ashamed because I mean, I'm the one that's affected by it, so it doesn't really matter. Sometimes I just let things go. And if I don't have the energy for it, I'm like, fuck it, whatever. Sorry. Sorry for that. But like at one point I didn't do laundry for a whole month. And the thing is, I have enough of a wardrobe where that wasn't problematic. I didn't have to rewear like dirty underwear. Um, because I was the type of person that would go to Ross like every Saturday or Sunday and buy like a pack of underwear, like, you know, or buy a bra or something like that because it was so cheap. So back then, I accumulated a lot of things, and because once you start having a lot of clothes, uh, the clothes, ironically, the clothes actually last longer. Not ironically, because each piece of clothing is worn less, so it lasts super long. Like, I have sweatshirts and t-shirts, like, from 20 years ago that I still wear, you know what I mean? And, if you buy a slightly higher quality, then it lasts even longer. But if you have, like, if you wear each less, they last, like, exponentially longer. So I've learned that. And, I'm not really into clothes at the moment. So, um, yeah, I just buy like 1 or 2 pieces a year. And even at that, I can probably go like 2 or 3 months without without doing the laundry. Naturally, I wouldn't, because that's a mountain of laundry is not pleasant, you know what I mean? But I've told myself that if I have to cut corners to to feel okay, you know what I mean? Like, if I'm feeling down and I'm gonna watch a YouTube video, right? I'm not gonna drag myself to make myself feel a little bit better and take a rest. If I'm stressed out from work, I'm tired, I'm not gonna go out and do laundry, you know what I mean? I'm not gonna kill myself to scrub the little bit of dust from the corners of my room. I'll let that go for, I don't know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before I vacuum it, right? And it's, as long as it's not, like, unhygienic in terms of, like, I wouldn't let rotting food or garbage heap up, you know what I mean? I feel like these little things, like dusting the perfume bottles or something, dusting the countertops, they're not super urgent, you know what I mean? Unless you're, like, deathly allergic to dust or something. So, yeah, I try not to be too stringent on myself, because I feel like I only have this much energy. I'm not like an high energy, whirling dervish type person. And yeah, I can get along fine. So, yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I try to stay positive. I try not to get too emotional ever at anything, because at one point in my life, I got so emotional and worried about stuff, and it didn't come to fruition. You know what I mean? It wasn't as bad as I thought, um, that I made myself ill. So, in terms of like acid reflux and not being able to sleep and stuff like that. So, that stuff is something that I want to avoid in the future. So, I learned to put a stoppage on that type of downward spiraling. So, yeah, so that's my background. It's a lot longer than I thought. No, actually, I knew it was going to be a really long video, but yeah, so that's me. So you can just pick and choose what you want to listen to and don't listen to, but that's me in a nutshell. Here I am. Um, I really feel like I don't really have anything to hide. And, what's the point of hiding anyways? The whole point of these videos is just to be like honest and to have a voice. Another thing is, like, as I grow older, I'm not as I don't give as much importance to strangers judging me or something like that, because no matter what, as long as it doesn't affect me, I'm just going to do what I feel is right. So it doesn't really matter. So anyways, enjoy this video if you can. If not, too bad. I have many other videos and other stuff. So yeah, enjoy and have a great day. And yeah, thanks for suggesting that I introduce myself. I hope you haven't like regretted that request. But no matter what, yeah, have a great day. I'm gonna go out and take a walk now. So yeah, have a happy holidays if I'm not able to come back with any time during the holidays with a video. I'm going to use that time. My office closes down, so I'll use that time to catch up on housekeeping and work-related stuff. There's probably a lot of perfumes that is probably going out on eBay too. So yeah, see you later. Have a good one, and talk to you later. Bye.